right. All good?
All right, all good.
Perfect. Well, thank everyone for attending. Anyone who's watching this right now, this is the first bass masterclass put together by the Los Angeles College of Music and Bass Magazine. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel or Facebook sometime in the future, thank you for watching. I hope everything is really good when you're watching this because it's been a wild year. So to the future people, hope it's good. But with us today, my name is John Dioria. I'm the editor-in-chief of Bass Magazine, and with us we have Chris Jisi, who is the senior editor of Bass Magazine, and the amazing Jerry Watts Jr., who is not only a superb player with a great resume, but also the head of the bass department of the LACM. So, Jerry, want to say some stuff?
Yeah, welcome everybody. We're pretty pumped for this today. We have an incredible lineup of people, and we're so happy to be partnering with Bass Magazine to kind of share this with you guys and do something for the bass community. You know, it's been quite a time, I think, and so yeah, we're very, very excited about this. I think, John, why don't we just jump right into our first guest?
But before we start, if you are interested in taking your playing and learning to the next level, then log on to lacm.edu. We got a plug. And check out their curriculum. You can study under the amazing Mr. Watts right here. And of course, as your bass resource for everything low end, go to bassmagazine.com. And something really quick before we keep going is that this is the Pedals and Effect Masterclass, which is our first topic. And when you think about pedals and effects, even the name coined in that order, you think of the great Juan Alderete. And we would love more than anything to have him here as one of the panelists. He could run the whole show. But he is recovering from an injury that he sustained back in January. And but we love you, Juan, and we're proud of your recovery. Next time we do this, we'll let you run the show. So, but on that note, we will bring in another pedal guru as our first guest. Now, this guy not only has multiple signature basses and a very rare feat, he has multiple signature pedals. And in the bass world, he's kind of this champion and legend of pedals and effects. And that he's played with David Bowie, Tedeschi Trucks for a long time, and most recently Black Crowes. He's been insanely prolific through this lockdown era, and we love watching his videos all the time. And we're happy to have him here with us today, Mr. Tim Lefebvre. What's up, Tim?
Thank you, man. What's going on? Oh, what's happening?
Yeah, man. So as you can see, we have Tim and we have his pedal board view right there. So this is kind of what he's been working with recently. And Tim, can you just right out the gate, are there any very recent additions to that have just been added on?
Yes. Well, there's the new, the latest and greatest 3-leaf audio octaver, my signature octave pedal.
Of course.
Which is cool, actually, because then it's basically the same size, the same small casing, but he managed, Spencer Doran managed to get the sub switch on the small casing. So now it has the solo sub switch, like the old big unit. So it's like, that's pretty rad. I have the green pedal is the Count to 5 by Montreal Assembly. Just this kind of wild, I mean, I'm just kind of wrapping my head around it. It's kind of this wild delay thing, looper, plays back stuff weird. And next to that is there's a guy from Eugene, Oregon named Mark Leahy, and his company's called Make Sounds Loudly. So that's a fuzz face / univibe, basically the same circuitry as the vintage old things. And so I'm mostly using the vibrato off of it, which is pretty rad. And then all the way to the left, this one right here is what's that brand called? Infinite Jets Microcosm. Infinite Jets. It's Hologram is the company. They also make this thing called the Infinite Jets, which is another ambient pedal. This is their new thing called the Microcosm, and again, it's another one. I don't know all the ins and outs of it yet, but it's pretty fascinating. I just have it on a certain setting right now, and you'll hear it in a sec. But it's pretty rad. Actually, the red pedals is the Mataverse swell delay. I'm really into Mataverse's stuff, and also his inflection point tremolo. So, which the tremolo is cool because it accepts CV from like, you know, any kind of analog synth. So you can pulse and you can lock it up with a drum machine. So everything you do can be to a beat. So it's cool. Yeah, it's fun stuff.
That's amazing, man. And so do you have kind of like a ritual or a set thing that you do when you get a new pedal to kind of, you know, test it out and dial it in, or is it different with every one that you get?
It's kind of different. I mean, it depends on how complicated it is too. I mean, some of the recent ones I've gotten are pretty complicated. And, you know, like the microcosm from Hologram comes with a big manual, which I haven't even explored yet. I mean, it's got MIDI cables, I mean, MIDI inputs and outputs on the back. So you can, obviously there's a million things you can do with it. And the count to 5 too is pretty complicated. And I happen to get one off the site, so it doesn't have any labels on it. So like, you know, not only do I not know what the labels would do in the first place, it doesn't even say what the labels are. So I'm like, oh, okay.
Yep.
So just trying to wing it. I'm just kind of winging it with those things, but they're fun. I mean, you know, you can always, I'm an improviser, so it's, you can polish a turd anytime you need to. So.
Absolutely, man. Well, can we hear some of these pedals in action then right now?
Yeah, sure. I'm sort of in kind of an ambient headspace recently, so I'll just do some of that stuff and yeah, see what comes out. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, so that's kind of what's happening. It's like an instant film soundtrack, you know.
That's beautiful, man. Oh, that's fantastic. So I couldn't even begin to pick apart what was going on right there.
It's just, you know, a lot of it's just layering into, you know, like just keep layering your stuff into the pedals that can modulate it, and or like the hummingbird from Earthquaker Devices, like can make, you know, that's the one that's giving it the pulse. So like, you know, if you just play it in with regular bass, you know, I mean, so it's really just, you know, building up sounds before that and just making it kind of do its thing. But it's fun. Yeah, I mean, you know, that's all ambient stuff. I mean, obviously I've done like a lot of electronic music, and so, you know, the octaves come out and just, I love bashing out subs all the time and stuff. But that's kind of that. I mean, you know, that's what I've been sort of working on.
Nice.
I'm home all the time.
And so, yeah, so you know, obviously you're saying you're into ambient right now, but you play in a lot of genres from jazz, of course, to, you know, rock, everything across the board. And improvisation is huge in all those, you know, genres, especially something like jazz and ambient music. How, you know, even apart from your playing, how do pedals kind of, you know, inform your improvisation, and how, you know, how does that kind of change your mentality about improv?
Well, it's cool because having a sonic palette, like when I you know, it's in LA when we do gigs all the time, like, you know, knowing the personality you're going to play with, like obviously, you know, like I'll tend to bring a bunch of, because I'm gonna play sub stuff. I'm not always just about shredding on the bass and like playing bass and bass licks and stuff like that, because I mean, to me, just by nature, it just kind of feels limiting to me. So like, you know, sometimes when you're improvising, like it's cool to have some surprises, like playing with a pick, for instance, and playing hollow body. It's like, whoa, you know, all of a sudden you're like, even if you're in like bitches brew mode, like having a sub bomb or a pick or just some kind of, or you know, that kind of swell delay thing to make things more interesting. You know, that's just kind of what I think about sometimes. You know, just how to bring another angle to it. You know, because improvising is, you know, if you're playing upright bass, okay, that's cool. That's what it is. But for an hour, if you want to make people listen to this, like, you know, I think, you know, bringing some electronic dance music stuff into it per se can help make it feel more human and like more familiar to people, instead of just like, whoa, what the hell's going on up there? You know?
Absolutely. And so, you know, for a lot of your big gigs, you know, the sound, what's required for them varies quite a bit. You know, Black Crows is going to be different than your work with Bowie was, than Tedeschi Trucks, than, you know, across the board. At what point have you always, you know, been really infatuated with pedals and effects, or was it, you know, there's some point when there was a necessity for them that kind of started channeling into all your projects?
Yeah, I mean, I had some going on Tedeschi Trucks. You know, like there would be some spots where, you know, there was always some kind of thing where we would pedal E, like while Derek was playing some kind of, you know, like some lyrical rubato stuff. So like I would have a delay pedal, for instance. I always had the octave pedal. I mean, that comes with me no matter what. I use it very little with Black Crows because just none of it is on the old records. And if I want to drop a bomb here and there, I'll just do it. But I use it much. With Tedeschi Trucks, I felt like I had more freedom because I was co-writing some of those tunes too. So some of it became the sound. So I was just kind of, you know, it added cool, you know, maybe it was messy for the front of house guy, but it added some cool thickness sometimes. And also, you know, to me, an octave pedal is a momentum builder too. You know, you play the same lines over and over again, but if you add the octave pedal to it, it kind of adds some intensity to me. So yeah, that always was kind of there. I recently, you know, with the Crows, I started using a compressor just because, you know, if you're getting blown off the stage, sometimes a compressor can act as a boost. So that's kind of, and some overdrives and stuff. But yeah, it's all basically down the pike. You know, nothing crazy.
Absolutely. And you're talking a lot about octaves, and as I said earlier, you have, you know, pedals that are signature pedals of yours. What goes into that process? Like how does it come about? Are you working with this, you know, with these you know, builders and companies and fine tuning them? Like what's that like kind of start to finish for you?
Well, honestly, I mean, the only one I kind of had some say in was the amp tweaker, the bass tight fuzz, like the Lefebvre tight fuzz, which is basically honestly, he had chassis laying around, so he called me up and said, let's make a signature model. So like, you know, everything's set at 12 o'clock on the bass tight fuzz is where it would begin on my signature model. So that one, you know, then we talked back and forth about how it should go and blah, blah, blah. So like that one I had some say in, but like, honestly, Spencer Doran with the Octaver has basically done it all himself. He used to see me at the 55 bar or something when he went to Berkeley, and like he'd see me bending down and changing the Boss OC2. So he had the genius idea to put a solo sub on it, so you know, I would never have to bend over and mess with the pedal again. So like that was just like, it's like, those are the kind of people I need in my life, you know, like I mean,
Exactly.
yeah. So it was kind of like that, and you know, like the LDP, the Rodenberg pedal. I mean, he basically, I don't know if he's going to actually put it in production, but that was just like kind of something I could, you know, mess around with at home. It just says Lefebvre on it, you know. You know, 'cause I don't think he does production stuff for the U.S. yet, but it's cool. It's a cool pedal. It's got a momentary switch on it, and yeah, I mean, you know, that's kind of the bottom line on that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what are the best pedals? Because not long ago, you and I were chatting, and I was kind of like, hey, you know, you're hip to like what's coming up. What are some good new pedals? And all of a sudden, there was like a list of like 20, and these aren't like the front page of Sweetwater or Guitar Center. These are like black market bodega stuff that are gonna be hot in like a year. What are the most? What are the pedals you've been most excited about lately, or even ones that you want to get your hands on?
Well, the ones I like the best, I mean, you know, I like the Red Panda Lab Tensor, because that's another glitch pedal. We just kind of like the more, you know, so I could do some more ambient stuff, but also these things are good for other instruments like guitar, keyboards, and stuff like that. I just got this recently. This is pretty exciting. It's a Sono Buono sidechain compressor, which, yeah, it takes, so basically, I mean, you know, it takes audio, MIDI, CV, whatever, and then, you know, basically can pulse, and then you plug your bass into it, and like whatever the pulse is, you know, it just kind of does the sidechain compression for you. So like, this is really rad. It's really a new thing, a really cool thing. Yeah, I mean, the Count to 5 is something I've wanted for a long time. It's not exactly new, but it's you know, anything weird I love. You know, delays that sound like, one of my favorite artists is this guy Fink, and he's from the UK, but he lives in Berlin. So he's always done stuff with the RE20 by Roland, the Space Echo. So like, I'm always kind of trying to find things with those kind of time trails, and you know, stuff that kind of kicks and is like kind of fading out. You know, like this kind of stuff that makes you kind of go like little ear candy things. So that kind of stuff is cool. Yeah, this Microcosm is just bananas. I don't even know where to begin on that one. But all the Dark Glass stuff, you know, is awesome. Yeah, it's like, just like, if you just want hardcore overdrive, that's the best stuff. So yeah. That's
amazing, man. And we're going to be talking about this a lot with all of our guests tonight, but how important is your pedal chain? Like, what's kind of your methodology for the order that you place them, you know, being that some pedals do impact other, you know, pedals in sequence. Do you have kind of a theory or method about how you do that?
Yeah, I mean, generally what I found, like Juan Alderete does it slightly different. Like Juan puts a compressor before any octave pedal stuff. So like he's driving a steady amount of sound into stuff, and I'm just kind of more random about it. But definitely the first thing that comes is the octaver, you know what I mean? And then I run fuzzes, you know, fuzzes, distortions, just to get some more overtones on it, because then you're running it into modulation pedals like chorus, you know, like the Univibe or whatever. And so like then it's kind of like more synthy because you've added all these overtones to it. So that's kind of like one thing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, basically you go subs first, fuzzes, you know, stuff to add overtones, and then modulations. So that's kind of my rule of thumb. And then afterwards, like delays and all that stuff. So like you could build a sound and then put it through other stuff. You know, it's like layer. You know?
Yeah. Someone just asked if we could hear the octave pedal isolated.
Oh yeah, sure. Let's see.
Is that possible?
Yep. So, all right. So here's, I have it tuned to the OC2 mode. So that's that. I'll put it on the, now I'll put it on the Mutron octave. Now here it is soloed. So here's the Mutron octave. Yeah, I'll turn the mic down a second. So yeah, it's like, and then here's the OC2. So yeah, and if you go, you know, there's a blend in the middle, so now you're getting kind of both circuits. I mean, I think the Mutron's weirder and cooler. So like, because then, all right, so for instance, here's your, you know, and then, you know, so that's that one. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, you know, the solo sub switch is clutch. So because you can also like do it in rhythm. So, you know, let's go. You know what I mean? So like, or you can just keep these. Let's see. You know, so the momentary switch is cool. Yeah, I've broken many a momentary switch on the OC2 and this thing, just because I'm, you know, sometimes you get into like doing rhythm stuff. So yeah, it's cool. I mean, I had honestly nothing to do with the R&D of it besides just being a fool playing on OC2s, and Spencer figured it all out. So
nice.
Yeah. I mean, and I'll be honest with you, I don't make a dime from this. It's by far the best octave on the market to me. I mean, there'll be people who disagree, but to me, I haven't heard a better one that does more and is easy to use and blah 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 and sounds great.
That's fantastic. Maybe we'll get a link up in the chat for people to check that out. And then we were gonna see if you could play again, but before that, if you what pedal and what players that use a lot of effects and pedals have either always inspired you, or are there any bassists recently that are blowing you away with the stuff they're doing with pedals?
I mean, Ian Allison. I mean, so he's like taking my stuff and run with it further. It's really really cool to see him doing it because he's nailing it. He's got the cool sounds. But this is all online. Like the guys I've seen. I mean, back in the day, this is all stemming from like the late '90s, early 2000s in New York when we were doing live drum and bass with like Jojo Mayer and Zach Danziger and I was playing with this band called Droid. So like I was just kind of doing it. So I was doing it. Jesse Murphy was doing it. Jonathan Marin was doing it. Schooley Severson was doing it. Severson, I'm saying his name wrong. There was those guys who were doing it, and I saw some guys in Europe doing some cool stuff too. But it was all kind of circled around the live drum and bass scene in New York. So like that's how we all kind of figured out what was going on. And now there's a million people who do it great. John Davis, the guy who owns Bunker Studios in New York. Like he's run with it too, like a very very far. So he's cool. Yeah.
That's great, man. Well, would you mind playing another nice ambient segment or whatever you're feeling to
Sure.
play us into the next patch?
Yeah. All right. Let's see what I got here. Well, actually, I just found this good.
Ooh, yeah.
I just wanted everybody to hear that sound. That's the Iron Ether ephemeron into the Alpha Omega by Darkglass. It's basically instant dubstep, which is kind of rad. All right, so enough of that. Because I didn't really pay attention to that one. So let's see. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Fantastic, man. Well, good. Well, Tim, thank you so much for that. And we're hoping, of course, that you'll stick around and we have more questions and we'd love to have your opinion with these other panelists. But right now we're going to bring in our second guest of tonight, which is the amazing Neil Jason. And we're going to have our very own Chris Jisi give him a little shout to kick this off.
Hey, guys. Thank you, Tim. That was awesome.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, Tim.
And we're excited to have Neil Jason on. There he is. Hey, Neil.
Hey, guys.
You guys know
Hey,
Neil,
Neil.
studio legend. Brought the sound of his 60s L series jazz bass to the New York studios with the back pickup favored slightly. Such a distinctive sound. I run into so many players that are like, you mention your name and it's like, oh, the sound. And I guess I just should name some of the credits: Paul McCartney, Billy Joel, Cyndi Lauper, Mick Jagger, Plastic Ono Band, Roxy Music, Brecker Brothers, Brian Ferry. You've all heard Neil, whether you know it or not. And the exciting thing is Neil has now entered the effects world with his own product, the Sea Moon Funk Machine, which we're going to get into and you're going to demonstrate. But I just wanted to get a little historical context first, because you broke in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
I know you were a fan of, you were inspired by Larry Graham, who used effects. I know you liked that Anthony Jackson used a Maestro phaser on For the Love of Money. But what was it like in those days trying to use an effect on bass on sessions?
Yeah, and thanks for having me, guys. And hi, Chris. And hey, Tim,
Yeah.
whatever soundtrack you just played, when it comes out, I'd like to buy a copy of it because the movie's going to be great.
It's called The End of the World. Anyway.
Yeah, okay. Well, then maybe I only need one copy.
End of the World meets Nine Inch Nails, I guess.
Yeah, it was beautiful, man. It's good to see you too.
Much done, man. You're a legend and a god of bass.
Thanks, bro. Using pedals on sessions back then was great, especially on bass, a great experiment. And you had to play to the song that you were playing to. You had to think about the song. You couldn't just like interject pedals. And I was lucky enough to subtly introduce pedals on certain tracks where the producer was magnanimous enough to say, yeah, let's take a shot and do that. Sometimes they take 2 tracks just in case later, thinking, so there's a chorus on the bass on every, maybe that's not a great idea. But it did get to stay on a lot of tunes. And I did carry them with me mercilessly, trying to get them on all the time. And occasionally it worked. The chorus got on a lot of stuff. The Funk Machine, the original Sea Moon Funk Machine, was on an enormous amount of stuff because it was inherent in a lot of the Brecker Brothers music, and then it became part of the English scene too. And I even got to use my vibrato pedal on Dire Straits on One World, just because Mark was looking for something and I was doing the finger slide to make it go, ah. And I said, well, I have an electronic version of that. Yeah, well, plug, just let's see. So sometimes we would just plug in every pedal that was anywhere. All my pedals, whatever was at Power Station, whatever the guy next door had with him, just to see what the sound would be. Did it get on a lot of records? Nah, but it was a lot of fun. And you learned a lot. I mean, my pedal board became basically like a tuner, an envelope filter, distortion, chorus, vibrato, delays, and sometimes it would be multiples. Like I'd have 2 delay boxes. I used 2 different, funk machines. Different octave boxes had different effects. When Mike Matthews was doing electro harmonics, I probably owned every electro harmonics box that was ever made, just to see if they would work. And sometimes when they specifically made stuff for bass, it wasn't nearly as good as just using an MXR that had been made for guitar if you tuned it incorrectly. But yeah, we tried on a lot of things, but it wasn't a called for situation on a lot of pop music. In jazz, not, in fusion, yeah, plug in every freaking pedal and we would have a ball. And you could hear it in the live concerts, guys are just stepping on stuff. We would just turn on every pedal and everybody turn on every pedal and let's play a song. It's it's due to guys like Tim and a lot of the guys now who use it on a lot of different things, where pedals for bass are extremely acceptable, and I love it. I would love to have showed you my pedal board from the last tour, but it's in lockup in London along with everybody else and everything else. But it was pretty straight ahead. Like Tim was saying, and I'm sure other people will say the same thing. If you're on tour, especially if you're playing songs that are already well known, things that have been recorded, whether you were the original bass player or not, you can't add and or detract on a major level. If the entire song was done with a funk machine, more than likely you're going to do it with a funk machine. If it had a chorus on, you're more than likely going to do it with the chorus on. If it didn't have any effects, except for occasionally live when you want to spook the band or make everybody jump up, you're going to play. Tim knows what that is. You're going to play what the record was, and not try and interject too much of your own giddiness that night. But yes, I have been able to do that in tons of club gigs, and the Sea Moon is actually the reason I used a lot of envelope filters was the original sound of the, is the original, like we on all the Brecker brothers. That it was on so many songs after a while. So, but then I got used to using it on funky stuff because if you backed off correctly, you could make it speak in between. But the other cool sound was for the sub stuff. Where's the pedal? I'm not in the studio today, so this is now, I don't know if that's blowing up the world. It's hard for me to do it right now, but as opposed to just with nothing on. So I had the sub put in to the funk machine. If you dial out, all of the depth and you have the frequency all the way up, you end up with a complete sub that I tuned in the harmonics, just like the original funk machine had. It's a lot of fun. There's a number of reggae-inspired tunes in a lot of the bands that I tour with, and you get to, as opposed to changing and leaning down like Tim was saying, I just use two boxes. One is set one way, one is set the other way. And the order of the boxes, it depended on the song. Sometimes you'd set up, and I always would have the chorus at the end before the delays. The delays were always my last thing. But on the tour, I also had a delay in the middle of the chain because there's a song where you wanted to affect the octave box, not the octave box having a delay. You wanted the delay to get octave, and it was a weird sound. So therefore, I'd use two different delays in two different placements in the box. In going around in New York City, I would just use a pretty standard, like 5-space pedal board. And I even had it running off of the Sanyo juice box for a long time, where I didn't have to plug into the wall. I didn't have to plug in anywhere. So, because we would play in clubs where the electricity was all the way over there and it was bad electricity, which sometimes made of pedals, there's certain pedals, especially now, if you're not getting good electric, they sound different. They don't work really good. Take a couple of pedals to Europe and you'll find out real fast which ones don't work when the electricity's no good. So the more you use them, the more familiar you get with them. Like Tim, I've got a couple of pedals that have so many controls that sometimes it's just a game or a crapshoot. I'm more into dedicated pedals, like here's a distortion, here's an octave, here's a chorus, here's a funk machine. And they do exactly what I need to get done. And they're on a lot of records, so I'm going to have to use them.
Let me interject there, because what we're going to do in the chat is post some of these classic tracks. Girls Just Want to Have Fun and Hideaway by David Sanborn. Cyndi Lauper's Girls Just Want to Have Fun, of course, was your Ibanez chorus pedal, I believe. But for the One World, you mentioned Dire Straits was the vibrato pedal. But for the funk machine, we're going to post, of course, the whole heavy metal bebop record. Also, Mango Bop, Narada Michael Walden, and the
Mango Bop.
So how did you get what made you go to the funk machine first when you decided to come back and build your own pedal?
Luckily enough, now I do have the time and the people to work with, my partners, and Ben Fulton being one of them, Jack Thompson, Ben Fulton being just a pedal genius. The funk machine was introduced to me by Michael and Randy Brecker. They used it on everything, on the horns, on the keyboards, on the bass. So I got used to using it a lot, and it disappeared over 30 years ago. So I started working on putting one together, and basically we just kept doing it because I have original recordings of the funk machine, and we have the actual recordings in the mixes, obviously on the records, but I had some soloed, and I also had, luckily, the memory and the finger memory of what it was to play the original funk machine. So we dialed it in for quite a while, and like everything else, luckily I was able to take it on tour and use it until we honed it in and got it into something this small with the sub, because the original was about, yay big. And it was fun and it was cool, but it would last, I don't know, if you took it on the road, maybe you had a month before you'd have to fix it or replace it. They just weren't set up to go and get trashed like we do them for real. So I had this one built so I could enjoy it on the road, and if it drops, it's really not going to happen. It's pretty bulletproof. And yeah, I got it to match that sound, and I added just, natural things. The original didn't have a volume. This makes it a little bit easier for you to have it in your pedal board and level the stuff out. This also has an enormous boost on the top, so that, depending on what bass you're using, different basses act different ways. 6 strings are different, 5 strings are different, 4s active, not active. So in order to deal with the 20th century, we added a couple of things, and I'm thrilled with the way it came out.
And can we is John Herrera out there? I wanted to put John on the spot and bring him on because he's reviewing the pedal.
Yes.
And John, I wanted to see if you had any questions for Neil. And also, Neil, let me say that you have an offer for our viewers tonight. Let's just mention that too.
Yeah, and not trying to be overly insane about it, but I'd love to offer anybody who's on tonight and anybody from the college, if you send an email to jack@cmoonfx.com. I would like to offer this to anybody tonight at a really big professional and student discount, so that you could avail yourself of one if you'd like to have a C-Moon funk machine. So again, jack@cmoonfx.com, and tell him you're from the LACM online masterclass, and he will offer you the incredible price.
Cool. John,
Thanks,
any
I appreciate it, guys.
Question for Neil or thoughts?
I
know you were impressed by the touch sensitivity.
Yeah, I thought what I dug about the funk machine, I spent a bunch of time with it the past couple of days, was
cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah, it's very sensitive, like like you were describing the way you when you discovered envelope filters that touch, that we can find that spot where it just starts to kind of open up and kind of use that musically. You know, I love that about effects in general, the ones that are musical, that feel like an extension of your instrument or, you know, of what you're trying to do. And kind of, there's this feedback loop where it starts to inspire things in you and vice versa. So I love that about it. And it's just a super gooey and wet, funky sounding filter, you know, which is what we want, I think.
Right. And again, it is to me the analog recreation of my favorite analog pedal. And I'm going to continue that with the Sea Moon Company and just keep seeking out crazy, perfect, old style analog pedals that I just would like to have in my pedal board. And I think other guys would too.
Neil, thank you so much for your time. I know you're going to stay on.
My pleasure. Absolutely.
Bring John D back. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Neil.
Thanks, Neil.
My pleasure, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Neil.
All right, so this is a nice little segue into our next guest. Of course, he is one of our, I'm a little biased, but I think he's the best gear reviewer in the biz. He's a writer for Bass Magazine. Amazing guru of pedals and effects and all things bass. And Mr. Jonathan Herrera. Jonathan, thank you for joining us.
What's up? How's it going, everybody?
What's
Good to
up?
see you.
Hey, John.
Hey.
At the whole crew. So yeah, so obviously it's been a wild year and a lot of things, you know, obviously tours, shows, all that is halted, but the gear industry has kind of stayed in perpetual motion through this. What pedals recently have you gotten your hands on that have impressed you? Obviously you were just talking about Neil's fantastic pedal, but outside of that, what's been kind of exciting you in the effects world lately?
You know, I think there's, the past couple years have just been this explosion of boutique pedal designers that are kind of fusing the analog and the digital side of things. You know, I remember like when I first got my hands on, I think it was the Electro Harmonix Memory Boy, it might be. That came out maybe 10, 12 years ago. And I remember it was the first tap tempo analog delay that I had, you know, run into. And and that was always to me the limitation of something like an analog delay. You know, and analog things in general was sort of part of what's beautiful and inspiring about them is the randomness, but maybe for a time-based effect, there's going to be situations where you want to sync it or you want to have a little more control. But the analog thing was always a little bit, well, maybe I can get the knob to kind of, you know, and so, you know, and that ability, that tap tempo, just as an example, ability with a delay pedal was only enabled by kind of a digital facet of this pedal. And so that, and that pedal also had some secret modes that would like cycle through different subdivisions of the time. And remember, that was the first time I really became aware of this like whole new world of possibility where you could take all the sound and richness and kind of like serendipitous madness of an analog pedal when you're tweaking it, but introduce even more flexibility with the digital thing. And so I think that's just like, since then, and that was, I don't know when that came out, maybe 15 years ago, I don't know. That world's just exploded. Like some of the pedals that Tim was using and playing, like some of these like, you know, modulated delay effects and like the stuff that Red Panda does and all the, I mean, there's tons and I don't even begin to know all of them. A lot of them are, because when you're in the digital domain, now you're basically can do anything, you know, essentially anything that a audio software engineer can dream up. And when you do that as the means of controlling analog stuff, then there's a ton of possibility. So that's one thing. And I'd say the other thing that's not personally something I've been using a ton in my music, but I know is very popular, perhaps more so now with guitar players, but I think bass players are starting to catch on, is the whole sort of modeling world, you know, that I think it's really come into like a place of maturity. I mean, I remember back in the day when Line 6, like when the first pod came out, you know, that was always like the ideal and the kind of goal kind of overshot the execution. it was like, oh, I mean, I remember when first hearing about it, it was like, oh, it can sound like any amp or any pedal, like, you know, in theory, that's like amazing. But then like in practice, it didn't, you know, it had some cool sound. There was for sure some cool sounds, and some of those old Line 6 pedals are actually pretty dope. But,
Yep.
but I think that now we're at a point where like that promise of modeling is starting to actually kind of come to fruition, and companies like AxeFX with the Fractal, Kemper, Line 6 has this Helix thing. Yep. Like those are pretty amazing. And again, now we're purely in the software domain, emulating analog stuff. But because we're in the kind of software domain, we have all of the programmability that like a computer affords you. So the ability to pair your pedals with an app, or another one that's like I love. And there's guys I know, guitar players I know more so, that have like they only have these. They'll have 5 or 6 of these. They're like the Eventide H9.
Yeah.
You know, which has just got like insanely cool sounds and all over the map, tons of modulation stuff, time stuff, pitch stuff. It's all in a box that's, you know, not that big. But all of the interfacing you do with it is via an app on your phone or through an editor in the computer. So I think that is definitely the future. And then also, I think the democratization of home recording and composition, you know, whether it's just to kind of create ideas or you're actually making tracks to release or whatever, but the fact that everybody now can get a copy of Ableton or of Logic, and with a, you know, basic computer and a basic interface can make, you know, kind of realize all of their visions. That is starting to be a place where I know people who use Ableton in real time with really low latency, you know, converters are now able to actually use the plugins in Ableton in real time as if they were effects. Wow. And you can couple that with external MIDI controllers, so you can actually interface it in a way that's more musical than like, you know, I've had gigs where it was like I had a laptop on stage and it's like kind of a little overly dorky to be. It's not rock and roll, you know. Jimmy Page would not have approved to be huddled. You know, I mean, there's certain things where that works, certain places that doesn't work, and I always found like that a little bit like a layer between me and the audience. So there's all kinds of cool stuff that enables you to kind of treat the software stuff as if it were hardware or analog, you know, stuff that we're more accustomed to using. So
right. Now
that's kind of the stuff that's exciting.
Absolutely, and that segues perfectly into. I mean, for those of you like not totally familiar with Jonathan, he's a smoking player and amazing synth player as well. He's a teacher. He's actually on staff with LACM as well. And another huge element for you is production. And that obviously has changed kind of in the landscape of pedals and effects and bass players. So when you're going to track something, whether it's you or a band or a player coming in, what's your approach to kind of, you know, if they come in with a huge pedal board, you know, does that change your kind of game plan? And also, how do plugins kind of counter? Are you ever kind of like, we can do this on, you know, my end?
I mean, usually if someone comes in to track and they bring a pedal board and it's their music or it's their band's music. I mean, I don't want to be like, I can do that better. I got some sweet new waves shit I mean, that's just not my role. Like I should be there to capture their vision. I do always try to also capture a dry signal, you know, so there is I don't have all of that stuff baked in after the fact, because they may discover that, because sometimes you have people who aren't as experienced in the studio and they're much more accustomed to playing live and where that stuff works. And then you realize, well, in the context of a mix, having your, you know, giant subby octave with the it's just kind of not working. So to have the flexibility after the fact is really important. But I never want to get in the way of someone, you know, doing the thing that they want. I do enjoy very much like how much is possible now in the kind of software domain with plugins. You know, especially like I'm a huge fan of you know, in terms of like emulation stuff of like the universal audio stuff. I mean, to be able to get pretty faithful recreations of like priceless, super rare pieces of gear, whether it's like a Fairchild compressor or some, you know, Telefunken preamp, that kind of stuff that anybody can kind of access those sounds is exciting. You know, and there are tons of, actually on the plugin side of things that I don't know that this has creeped into kind of more like performance stuff, live stuff, but the big revolution in that scene is AI, is the emergence of like artificial intelligence plugins. There's what's that?
How does that work exactly?
I mean, oh, well, let me tell you how artificial, I have no idea. But I think the basic idea is that it is making sort of, I mean, it's definitely that category is not for someone who wants a lot of fine control over every parameter of something. But I do think the intelligent part is that it is analyzing the audio in real time and is reacting to it in a way that's sort of unique to that audio signal, rather than just kind of being some settings that the signal's going through and then it's influencing in a one way, and no matter what the audio would be, it would be that way. Instead, it's reacting to all kinds of facets of the audio. I use this, there's a few examples of this. One would be, there's a really great plugin called Sugar by a company called Process Audio that is kind of like, and the thing with a lot of these is they're sort of like black box, like you turn them on and you twist the knob and like it sounds better, and trying to figure out exactly why is sort of like, you know, make your head spin. But that's kind of like a sweetener, kind of like, you know, I put it on like the 2 bus, like the final kind of stereo mix bus. That there's a popular compressor called Gullfoss. It's an Icelandic waterfall it's named after, that is amazing. And then a bunch of Isotope. Isotope makes some of the very cool plugins. One called Neutron, and it's kind of like doing all this magic in the background. And so, yeah, if you're kind of like a control freak, it might not be for you, but it does seem to can be like a little window into what the future might hold. You know, it does all. You don't have to play at some point. You just kind of call up something and then go home. I don't know.
And of course, you know, as well as what I was saying with Tim getting his hands on gear long before it's typically released to the public, you have that access as well. Anytime I want to see what's going on with, you know, Nordstrand or something, you've had it for months before it's released. And just recently, there was the big news in the bass world, which was Boss's release of the OC5, which you just did a very comprehensive review on, video review, which we'll try to pop a link in the comments. But tell me about that pedal, just kind of in general. This is very highly anticipated, and you know that's a staple in the bass world. What some of your thoughts on it?
Well, I think that they
speak up, boy.
I think that they definitely got the memo about what I think, you know, people are into this kind of shit, which is who's watching, thought of the OC3. Like the OC3 was not well received. I think that's fair to say. And I mean, like Tim, you're an OC2. You're one of the OC2 legends. So I'm sure you could speak to that, why that might be. But you know, the OC2 is kind of the definitive. You know, it's one of the definitive octave sounds. You know, because it does what it says it's going to do. It's rich and interesting sounding, and you can solo the sub, and the sub has kind of got this kind of synthy vibe to it. You know, it's a kind of a hack. You know, I kind of go into this a bit in that video and have talked about this in like Bass Player before, but you know, using an octave pedal is like the quickest way. And bass players always want to sound like synths. Like we always want to sound like Stevie Wonder on Boogie on Reggae Woman or whatever. Like we just want that sound, you know, and an octave pedal is a really quick way to do that if it enables you to solo the synth, because the synthesized lower octave sound in an octave pedal is a square wave. It's a filtered square wave. That's the way, but that's a product of the way it's generated. So it really does, and the square wave is like a primary sound of an oscillator of an analog synth. So the OC2 was a quick way to do that. It worked. And then the OC3 came out and it was digital. And so they duplicated all of the things that OC2 could do, plus added a couple features. I think it's actually had, I have one around here somewhere, but I think it had some polyphonic ability. And that's the thing about digital pitch shifting is it does enable you to play polyphonically. It will grab multiple notes at once. And it did that, but it just didn't sound vibey. It just sounded lame, you know, and no one wanted it. And so I think Boss kind of got the memo on that. So the OC5, the idea of the OC5 was to kind of offer what was best about the OC2 and what was interesting about the OC3, which was maybe the polyphonic ability, and kind of put it in one. I'm not sure why it's 5, because obviously it's like 2, 3, 5. So my first guess was, they added 2 and 3 because it was supposed to be a mix of those, and now it's 5. But I've since heard that the number 4 is like very bad luck in Japanese culture. So I don't know. But I dug it. So I think the OC5, the idea is it's analog and digital hybrid. It's kind of like what I started talking about, where that's kind of like the future, is this ability to. So it does have, as far as I know, the analog OC2 circuit plus like a digital pitch shifting circuit. And in certain settings, and there's a switch that says vintage or poly. And vintage is the analog circuit, and poly is like this digital circuit. And so you can combine these things. You also has an octave up, which, you know, is an acquired taste if you like that sound, that kind of like synthesized up octave sound. But it does enable you to do that. So if you want to solo, and you can actually just solo that, so you can turn off your direct, turn off, or you can have that going with your direct with an octave down and a second octave down. So you can actually have 4 layers of your pitch stacked. So it does a bunch of cool shit. It has a direct out, so you can, if something's plugged into that jack, you can have a dry signal and just the sub signal. So it's cool. I mean, you know, I guess it's a big deal when the new brown Boss pedal comes out, you know. And I thought that it was a nice, like, sort of restart from like the bad taste that the OC3 left in our mouths, you know.
Absolutely. We'll try to pop your video review link into the chat comments there. But
that'd be great. Yeah.
So much
smash that like button. Wait, sorry.
Exactly. Follow, hit the like. But yeah, thanks so much, and hopefully you'll stick around. You can chime in and on everything.
Yeah,
else.
happy to answer questions about anything.
Perfect. Well,
Thank
great.
you, guys.
Thank you, Jonathan. Well, you kind of got into synth, yes. You got into synth, which is a good way to lead into our next guest, who is a synth master. He's played with Eric Hutchinson and Cory Wong. You can catch him at Scott's Bass Lessons, where he's doing all types of work with Scott Devine. He has an amazing social media presence, and he's doing some of my favorite stuff online, which is taking synth lines from all genres of music and converting them to electric bass. And that is Ian Allison. Ian, how you doing, man?
Oh, I'm great. I'm great. This has been so fun to just watch and be a part of. Like, Tim, I was just saying, like, all your stuff has arc. Like, you do these ambient things and they have themes and arc, and I was really loving that very much. Jeez, man. Neil, so funky. I mean, and Jonathan talking about the AI stuff. I was thinking Adam Neely just did a video about that. And it's so cool to, like, generative AI. Anyway, I'm just thrilled to be here. Really, really feel happy to be here. So thank you.
Oh, we're so grateful to have you. And like I was saying, what you've been doing online, and go follow him on Instagram as well, and you will get videos constantly that'll blow you away. I've even fanboyed and messaged him about a couple where I was like, I've been wanting to know how to do that for a lot of years. So what Ian's been doing is he's been taking, you know, classic synth lines, converting the electric bass through pedals, transcribing the whole thing on his YouTube channel in PDF form, and including his pedal chain. So pretty much he's handing his viewers the key to playing these iconic parts. But Ian, what are the challenges of converting synth parts to electric bass? Because that's very, you know, counterintuitive things of each other.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. I mean, for me, I will say, like, when I started to get into it, I just did it because I loved it. And I am a terrible keyboard player. So, like, I bought a Moog little fatty thinking, like, oh, this is going to be easy and I'm going to learn analog synthesis in an afternoon. And of course, anyone that's done it knows that it's a lifelong pursuit.
Right.
But I could play this, and I could kind of like just, being a kid and plugging in pedals. I mean, my first octave pedal was the EBS Octabass. Anybody remember that one? I mean, that was the first one I had, 90s. And so, I was doing this stuff, but I always just sort of thought,
getting a little,
Yeah.
you're cutting just a little bit.
I would think, oh, I'm not. And then I had this, I wonder if we froze.
Maybe your screen's frozen.
I had this moment.
It went, there we go.
Oh, there we go.
Please shoot. Sorry, guys.
You're all good, man.
I had a moment. Yeah, I heard someone say to me once, like, whatever about your artistry makes you feel vulnerable or scared or like a faker or you're embarrassed about, that's your thing. Like, if you can double down on it, that's your thing. So I sort of was like, well, what if I just, what if I just do this and talk about it and decide that it's cool instead of thinking that it's not cool, So, we freeze again. Shoot.
A little bit. We can hear you though. It wouldn't be a Zoom session without some inevitable technical difficulties.
Yeah, shoot. I'm sorry, you guys. Are we back now?
We're back now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and anyway, I just decided to see it as a strength instead of see it as a weakness. And so then, I was just doing what I have always wanted to do. Was really happy to get the opportunity to work with SBL. And I pitched them the idea of like, hey, let's take these iconic synth lines over the years and show people how to create this stuff. And I maintain that really, like if people are feeling like, it's like, oh, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, Tim, everyone here has laid it out already. There's really sort of four components. There's an analog octaver or a digital octaver. I mean, any kind of just like square wave shaper, right? Then there's maybe some kind of gain or saturation. It can be a fuzz, a drive, whatever. I think then there's some kind of envelope situation. Not always, but I put that third. And then fourth, modulation, of course, right? We've heard about it. Vibrato, chorus, etc. And any combo of those things, like just the octaver is cool. The octaver with gain is cool. Just the octaver with modulation is really cool. So you start to piece together those four components, twist the dials, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this isn't so hard. Like, it's really not. To kind of start to grab some of those sounds, you just kind of use your ears and start to experiment. I think people just like see like, oh, I've got to have this massive pedal board. I have to, set up all these things. It's going to be so difficult. And it's really not. If you get those four components going, you can make 90% of the sounds. And not exactly. I mean, nothing's going to sound like a Voyager, but you kind of get in the zone and then it's cool. Like, I had to decide that it's cool that it's not the same. I'm not trying to be the same. It's a little different, and that's fantastic. Like, and then if it needs to be key bass, great, it should be key bass. But what about this other texture? And I found that that's really contributed to the session stuff that I do. I end up getting asked to do just probably like 80% kind of like synth bass on electric bass stuff when I play on things, which is a dream because it's what I love to do.
Absolutely. So that covers the pedal and the sound side of thing. And one thing I've learned from watching all of your videos, as far as the playing component of this, is that nothing is linear. Nothing is like first and second position, because you're replicating the synth bass, which hops all over. Like, you are all over your fretboard when you're playing these lines. So what about that side of it, the transcribing and finding the notes? Some of the songs you're hopping, 3rd fret to 16th fret, in a jump.
Yeah. I think too, like in academia, there's this notion that transcription is around, transcribe Parker solos, right? And obviously that's really great. The cool thing about synth bass is that it's still your role, but it's this like parallel universe. Because it's a piano, because it's laid out on a keyboard, or in MIDI, like in a piano roll, MIDI on a keyboard, you can do things that seem like incredibly awkward on the electric bass. And to endeavor to learn how to do those things on the electric bass, actually it's like, oh, I'm not playing a saxophone line. I'm playing the bass. I'm still playing something that is my role, but it is so different. So I think too, in terms of transcription, I think we need to start talking about the importance of transcribing synth bass lines, because it gives you this, like, it's such a unique thing. I feel like there's not really much like it. Like there aren't, you know, saxophones that are this parallel universe, maybe an Iwi or something, where like, oh, a sax is gonna try to emulate this electronic instrument. I'm probably wrong about that, but it feels kind of unique.
Mhm. Absolutely, man. And a great example of everything we were talking about is one of my personal favorite synth lines of all time, which was came out, I believe, in the late 90s, which is an Aaliyah track called Try Again,
Yeah.
produced by Timberland. For years, I used to talk with Juan Alderete about that, about what the pedal chain would be like to get that. And then one day, checked my phone and you had done it and you did it perfectly. Is there any way selfishly that you could kind of give us a little demo of that?
Yeah, I have some stuff set up, and let me just tell you, I'm sorry that I don't have a view of the pedal board. If anybody wants to know, if you go to Instagram, it's a pretty simple board. I have a compressor up front, but that you wouldn't need, right? But I just like it. It's an Origin Cali 76, followed by Tim's octave pedal, the second version, which I absolutely love. I agree. I feel like it's the best octave pedal in existence, and I feel like I've played almost all of them. I love it very much. Then Spencer Doran, I had one of his groove regulators, which was one of the original like envelope filter. But I have a Proton of his and the Doom 2, which is like a kind of a low gain fuzz, and then into a HX Effects. So that's where I kind of get Swiss Army knife, where that I use the Line 6 HX Effects. I just use for like modulations, some drives. So for the Aaliyah thing, and if anyone wants to see the settings, it's on the YouTube video. Scott's bass lessons. It's called, I think, like the 10 synth bass lines you need to learn on your electric bass or something. It's on the YouTube channel.
We'll put the link up in the chat too.
Oh, awesome. Great. Yeah, you can check that out there. But yeah, I'll play this for you. Let me see. First of all, it's drop D. And what I did is I did a bounce of it because it's actually a half step flat, but I just did a bounce and pitched it up so that I wouldn't have to drop the whole bass and waste everybody's time. So let's see. Let me see if I can find this. So here, let's see. Can you still see me on the screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So what I'm doing is I'm turning on the Doom 2, which is a fuzz. I'll just bring these elements up one by one. So here's the Doom 2. And it's not like a blasty fuzz. It's very kind of like, it's almost sort of envelopey by itself. But it's a lot of gain, the most gain that it can deliver right now. And then I have this Proton, which kind of is set really high to almost give the squeak of kind of the Moog sound that I imagine Timbaland is using on this. And then that's some chorus. So let's see if I fire this thing up, and then I'll break it down and show you kind of slow.
What would you do to get to me? What would you say to have your way? Would you give up or try again? If I hesitate to let you in, now would you be yourself or play a role? Tell all the boys I'll keep it low. If I say no, would you turn away or play me off, or would you stay up? Don't succeed. Dust yourself off and try again. You can dust it off and try again, try again. But you don't succeed. You can dust it off and try again. Dust yourself off and try again, try again. I'm into you into me, but I can't let it go so easily. Not till I see what this could be eternity or just a week. And now I can't stand. It's off the chain. It's perfect now. Will it change? This ain't a yes. This ain't a no. Just do your thing. We'll see how it goes. Don't succeed. Dust yourself off and try again. Dust it off and try again. Try again.
Right? Let's see. All right. Let me see if I can get back to that.
Man.
Can you still see me?
Yes. Here again. That was fantastic. So obviously that's a busy line. There's a lot going on in that.
There's a lot going on there. Yeah. And I don't always play it perfectly, but here, let me break it down for you. So what happens is we're going to start here. So I'm in drop D. like you would never in a million years think to play those jumps, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Like it's just such a strange thing to like endeavor to find. And even this stuff where you're playing an F and then the G here, the G and then the F here. That's crazy. We would never do that. We would play it octaves. Right? And I mean, this sound isn't anything insane. It's just, it seemed like I was twisting the dials until I found like something that came close. It's not exactly the sound, but it comes close, right?
Of course, dude, it sounds spot on. And speaking of sound, I think Jerry wants to hop on, and he has a question that is applicable to everyone trying to work socials and video.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, Ian, that was fantastic. Hey, so I love your Instagram feed, and you just have one of the best sounds of anyone that I see, and I'm just curious if you have anything to share about how you're pulling that off, because it seems like the Instagram algorithm, like, slams the bass, and you really so often don't get. I don't feel the vibe so often. I'm just curious what you do for that.
Right. I think I feel like it's just a game. Instagram is just a game, and you have to decide to play the game, right? And it's sort of like I think about it as like Instagram chops. Like you just have to decide like, oh, that's where I'm playing. So you see what the compression does. I've uploaded a bunch of stuff. I mean, I've been doing this for a couple years now, and I remember smashing stuff and really trying to get it to pop, and then like, low end really causes the Instagram algorithm to break up. So you high pass. So I mean, I'm probably pulling tons of sub out of my sound when I bounce for Instagram. I mean, I mix, like when I'm posting on Instagram, I mix for Instagram because it would be insane not to, right? And I'm also chopping up arrangements. If I'm posting something that's 40 seconds long, I'm chopping up an arrangement that highlights the best bits. I also think fuzzy sounds on Instagram and over a Zoom call work better anyway. So it's kind of a nice platform actually to highlight gritty, synthy sounds. I mean, if I turn all this stuff off and you hear this jazz bass with old flats, that sound, I mean, I love that sound, but it doesn't speak as well over, I mean, if you're playing, that doesn't speak as well over somebody's phone when they're watching it, like on the way into Costco to buy toilet paper, like something with a bunch of texture and hair on it would, So I think about that stuff. That's part of why I post the stuff to Instagram that I do, is because I feel like, oh, this will actually, hopefully this kind of sound will resonate on this platform.
Absolutely translates. So great.
Cool.
Great. Well, Ian, thank you so much. It was such an honor to have you on here, and you're amazing.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I'm gonna hang out. I can't wait to see.
Perfect. Well, good. Well, thanks, man. We'll talk with you in just a little bit, and we're gonna let Jerry introduce our amazing next guest.
All right. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I gotta spotlight him first.
Well, there's a lot of Johns on here. So
yeah. Which John? Hey, everybody, this is John Avila. Yeah, John, we're so excited to have you. He's part of the LACM bass staff, but I became a fan of his many years ago when he was in Oingo Boingo, and he's played with Lucas Nelson and Promise of the Real. Is that right? Yeah, and Steve Vai and a whole bunch of other folks, and we're just so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me, and great speakers, everybody. Great things I just learned watching you guys play and talking about all your great ideas and your everything. So thank you for sharing that. Really happy to be here with all of you.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely. John?
Yeah, so well, to start off, we just yesterday when we were kind of sound checking in a very timely kind of fashion, you were talking about, being an LA native, that before they even hit the scene, and this kind of crosses over outside of bass, but this piqued all of our interest. You were talking about how you were learning things from seeing Eddie Van Halen perform in a garage, and how you were taking those things and applying them to bass. Can you give us a little background on that?
Yeah, I mean, this also, when we were talking, they had a story in the front page of the LA Times, and they were talking about before Van Halen became famous, they were playing all these backyard parties in my neighborhood where I grew up here in Pasadena, San Gabriel, San Marino. And I had just started playing. I'd probably been playing 6 months, and I was 16 years old. I actually owned a car and was driving a car before I ever played a bass. And the only reason I started playing bass was because I had a car. I was helping my friend move, and we moved him into this apartment, and there was an attic. And we looking up in the attic, and we got up there with a flashlight, and somebody had left a bass in the attic, and it was a Japanese copy of the Hofner bass, a McCartney bass. Of course, I love McCartney, so my friend sold it to me for $15, and I took it home, and that's the only reason why I started playing bass. But I never put it down. It was like love at first sight. And so I joined, one of my first bands was this band called Blowout. And of course we were too young to play in clubs or anything. And all we could ever play, I'm sure like many of you did, had your starts playing backyard parties, high school parties. So when I was that age, this would have been the early 70s. There was the vans were, the vans that you would drive around in, and people would guys would put mag wheels on the vans, and those became the rage. So they had parties, van parties, and there was this van club called Van Addicts. And so we got a gig playing. It was one of my first gigs, and we were playing at this party, and there was a band called Van Halen. And my first reaction, this is before I ever heard them, I was like, that is so cheesy. They chose that name just to get these gigs, that's what I thought. I was like, man, why did we think of that? We could be headlining. And then, later I come to find out that the brothers were named Van Halen, but I got to see them play before anybody did. And I got to see Eddie just doing what Eddie does. And he was already doing everything he did when he became famous. He was already doing it then. And he was doing the tapping. And so when I tell people the first bass player I ever saw tapping was me, because I never saw anyone else do it. I saw Eddie do it before most anybody ever saw it. So after that night, I remember going home and I was just like, what the heck? How was he doing it? I started tapping, but also it was the effects he was using and how he just made his guitar scream. And there was no bass effects back then. There was nothing. And so the best bass effect you had for me was just turning your amp up until it was about to fry. And that's how you got your distortion. But later on, I started getting things like the old Yamaha XPX90s, and I would run that through my rig, and just going through that would distort it in a certain way. And they had reverb and chorus, and they had pitch changer. And during bass solos, I would pitch it up like a fifth. And so I could doing that, and then, grinding out my bass amp, I could kind of sound like a guitar amp. And my thing with effects early on was not to make it sound like a synth. I wanted it to sound like a raging guitar player. And that's where I came from as far as effects. And I love still, today, my pedal board is here, but, and I love making the bass sound like all kinds of different things, but raging on the bass is something I really dig doing.
Of course. And so from there, obviously with Oingo Boingo, which is an extremely influential band, and your playing is very influential on, tons of us bass players from what you were doing. How did you apply effects, at that point? Obviously, you had the $15 bass to start. You were cranking the rig to get a little distortion, then introduce some stuff. What was your pedal situation like in that band?
By the time, working up through that band early on, like within like 2 or 3 years of me picking up my first bass, I started touring, and I started playing with other bands. My first touring gig was with Al Chicano, and we went on tour with Santana. And my first concert, this would have been like 1977 or 6 or 7, and I was playing in front of 40,000 people. And I really didn't have effects. I mean, I would just borrow guitar effects, you know. And finally I went to Europe. I was touring with a group called Triumvirate. They were Germany's version of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And it was there that I really started using effects. And it was just mainly guitar effects back in that day. And I was still using my Yamaha XPX 90. And then it was while I was there that I discovered punk rock. And I mean, I was playing funk and jazz up until then, but I guess it's just that something new came along, and it was punk rock. And I love playing fast and loud and crazy. And so I dove into that vibe, and I started a band called Food for Feet. And it's so funny. Our first drummer was Dave Garibaldi.
Wow.
I don't know. Dave wanted to play with us because we were just wild and crazy. And eventually, Johnny Vatos Hernandez, the drummer of Oingo Boingo, came to see us play at Madame Wong's. And we were in need of a drummer for some gigs coming up, and he ended up jumping in and ended up playing with us for 10 years. This was about 4 years before Oingo Boingo. And so when the Oingo Boingo gig came along, my main thing, for me, one of the crazy things was learning to play with a pick. I never played with a pick up to that time. And I remember at the audition, I was, I got through the songs. And there's another thing about the audition. I showed up and I had learned 5 songs. Like, I was ready to play them. I was so down. And Danny Elfman looks at me, he goes, "So what songs did you learn?" And I said, "Well, I learned this one, this one, this one, that." "Great, we're not playing any of those songs." I was like, "What?" He goes, "Anybody can learn a song off a record." He goes, "That's easy." He goes, "I want to see what you would bring to the table. So we're going to jam some Boingo songs, and I want you to see what you do." And me being a jammer from day one, it didn't freak me out. I was like, "Oh, we're going to jam. Okay, let's go." And apparently that was one thing that made me comfortable. And also too, was my voice, singing. They really needed a background singer. So any bass players out there who might be listening, if you got a voice, even if you might not be a lead singer, if you can hold a note, practice singing, because you're going to get a lot of gigs just because you can sing. And it ended up working for me with Oingo Boingo. Mm-hmm. And the one thing about Oingo Boingo is I didn't use a lot of effects in that band. It was mainly a lot of instruments. So my effect was switching from a 4-string to a 4-string fretted fretless bass to a 5-string to a 6-string, and to an upright, and then playing electric upright. And I played accordion, I played balafons, and it was always switching things up. And for me, that kept it exciting.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. And that translated to the music, of course. If anyone out there isn't familiar with John's playing, go check out their music. It will blow you away. I spent a lot of time on their YouTube channel watching those videos. But as far as today, I know we have a camera set up. Can you give us a little walkthrough of your pedal board? Let's see where we are in this part of your progression of gear.
Well, this is a rig I've been using for a number of years, and there's a couple of things in here I've been using forever. The first one is this big red pedal, the Boss GT6B. And that pedal has just been part of my arsenal for 15 years, if anything, if not longer. And you could hear it like one gig I did for years was the TV show Battlestar Galactica. And if you watch Battlestar Galactica, that pedal's like literally all over the place, and there's like 5 seasons. And Bear McCreary, the composer, would have me tune the bass down to like a low C, and the strings would just be rattling on the fretboard. But it created this really grungy sound, and going through the distortion of that was really the sound of the show that we used on cue after cue. And that goes into my whammy bar. And this is a regular old style guitar whammy. I've tried the bass whammy, but I prefer the regular whammy. And I use it for the low and the high. And from there, I'm going into this pedal called Ghost. And if you're familiar with the company Echo Park they make amplifiers, guitars, pedals, and there's a guy there named Marcus Hill that made that was the prototype he made in his garage, and that was the very first one he made. And he came over, he says, I want you to try this out. He brought it over, and I was like, this pedal's awesome. It's just a distortion pedal with 2 knobs, perfect for me. And you know, especially when you're on a gig and you're going for sound in your middle stuff, you don't want 20 knobs, you want 2 knobs, you know. And for me, a pedal like that is great. Then I'm going through a couple of Aguilar Chorusaurus and an Agro. And I use the Chorusaurus, of course, for chorus, but the Agro works great when I'm playing metal. And I play in at least 4 or 5 metal bands. And I do a lot of metal recordings. And so that works great for that, amongst my other things. Then I'm going through an actual Echo Park pedal here. This is the Echo Park. And then one year, this must have been about 8 or 10 years ago, I was at NAMM, and downstairs in the mom and pop booth, there was this little tiny company making these pedals. They're from Brazil, and they had this bass shaper. And those are, I love pedals that you typically won't find from anyone else using. I like these little garage, made in someone's garage kind of pedal. And I just think it makes it, to me, it feels you're being a little more unique when you do that. And so I love when I find these little mom and pop pedals. And so, I mean, I was thinking of playing something, but I was going through, I was looking for somewhere where I could share maybe something with you guys. And I found on Facebook, I found a video of me playing, and you could hear what I'm talking about, more of going for the guitar sound. And you could, and the actual pedal, this pedal board is in the video the whole time. So I thought, oh, this is great. Let me do that.
Yeah, let's see a clip of it.
Let's check it out. Let me share with you right now. And I'm just going to jump. This actually is my version of Dead Man's Party, which is the most famous Oingo Boingo song. But this is done in the style of Fever.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Over my shoulder. Waiting for an invitation to arrive. Going to a party where no one's still alive.
All right, all right.
That is awesome, John. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for taking the time with us to impart some of that knowledge and sharing your pedal board. And we'll hopefully you'll stick around for a sec. We have one more guest, and then we'll go a little round table. But so thank you, John. All right. Well, our final guest tonight is one of my favorite bass players out there. From playing with Adrian Belew to Echo Test, which is her own dual bass player band. She shared the stage with Les Claypool, Danny Carey of Primus, Tony Levin. It goes on and on. But sonically, she has some of my favorite sounds, and playing-wise, she blows my mind. Please welcome Julie Slick. Julie, how are you?
Hi, everybody. Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Julie, so this obviously, you're someone who's constantly on the road and very nomadic, going all over the place. This year kind of took us all and put us in one place, but that didn't stop, you know, as we've talked about, kind of accruing gear and impulse musical buys. Have you got any new pedals in the last little span that you've been excited about?
Well, I have been beta testing a couple Eventide pedals that I'm not allowed to talk about, so those are cool. But otherwise, I've started to use a Keith McMillan soft step to control my Pigtronics Infinity Looper, which has been helpful. Mainly, I was using it for doing gigs, so I wouldn't have to bend over and change presets. So that's what I'm using like the MIDI implementation from the soft step for. So that's been great. It's not so sexy as like a new like sonic pedal, a delay or something, but it makes my life easier. So that's good.
That's awesome. And so now that we kind of have the camera on and everything, why don't you give us a little walkthrough of what's on your pedal board right now?
Cool. You can see my pedal board. I just jerry rigged that up while everybody else was going.
Better pants, better leggings than anyone else has.
Perfect. Okay. So I can start with the bass even. Right here, it's not a guitar, it's not a baritone, it's a bass 6 by Lakeland, and one of the main cool features on it is this Roland GK3 pickup, which I use almost exclusively. The tone just from that, because I do a lot of stuff with alternate tuning with my VB99, which is what this goes into first. So it has like the P90s, but I mainly just use, like I said, the GK3 system, and then it's got these 2 buttons here which I can use to bank presets on the Roland on the VB99. And so yeah, it goes right into that, which unfortunately is a little bit out of frame. That's this guy right here. And I can use that to model a bunch of different basses, but also synths and guitar sounds. So that really confuses people when they think that I'm playing a guitar, because then it sounds like a guitar. So I have to constantly correct people. It's actually a bass. It goes out of that, and then we're now on the floor in the pedals. The Pigtronics Philosopher's Tone, little nano compressor. Then it goes into the Mantic Vitriol, which I'm using for fuzz. And I really love that fuzz pedal because it's got the low end and it's got EQ on it. Less knobs is more. I agree with a lot of the other panelists. But I like the fact that it has the low end knob, so it doesn't cut out like all your bass signal. I hate distortion pedals that when you kick them on, totally lose your low end. I'm sure everybody here can agree that.
I'm with you. By the way, that's the Vitriol is insanely good.
I love it.
Makes
go
great.
ahead.
Yeah, I said Mantic makes great stuff.
Totally. They actually wrote me a DM on Instagram while I was on tour with Adrian a couple years ago, and it was so funny because on that tour, I felt like the distortion fuzz angels were with me or something, because almost every city where I went, they were just like gifting me fuzz pedals. I don't know. Also, maybe the fans were trying to tell me something about like you need to improve your distortion. But once I got this one, we were playing in Boulder, and these guys showed up with this pedal, and they just came to the meet and greet and just dropped the pedal in front of me, and it's been my favorite for the last 6 years or so that I've been using it. I just love that thing. It's very gnarly. That goes into, I have a lot of Eventide on this board. I'm a huge champion of Eventide pedals. John talked a little bit about the H9. First, though, 10 years ago, they sent me this pitch factor, and that has been like a total game changer. I use the Quadravox algorithm on it a lot. That allows you to harmonize your single note and turn it into 4 notes, and you can choose between 2 octaves below and 2 octaves up on any given key, and so that you have a choice of 4 different notes, pitch A, B, C, and D. So you can pick whatever interval you want and really have fun with it, and you can change the key and the mode and what your root note is. So it's super amazing. I'll play you a little bit of that later. Then, of course, you have the H9, which has all of those pitch factor sounds inside of it. It's completely maxed out. All the space reverbs. I'm really unconventional. I don't really use a lot of modulation effects, maybe like modulated delays, but I'm like Tim. I like ambient stuff, and I like experimenting with the depth of bass and like feeling like I'm down in a well or out in space somewhere. So I use those 2 pedals in conjunction a lot, like especially the Quadravox algorithm in a reverb, or sometimes I'll use 2 different harmonizers at the same time and get like 8 different notes, and that's really fun and cool. That all goes into the Infinity Looper, which I really have struggled to find a better looper. It drives me crazy because it's not the most solidly built. So it's broken on me a few times, but like I said, have struggled to find a looper that does everything that this thing can do, like between loading pre-recorded loops. I will program drums in Logic and load them into the looper. So when I do solo shows, it enables me to sound even bigger than I already do. The fact that you can synchronize one loop to another. When I first started looping, as I'm sure a lot of you guys out there, it's pretty hard when you first start looping. So the fact that you can synchronize the second loop to record the same amount of time as the first loop, or loop twice around if you have a longer melody line or something like that. So that's been another game changer, especially for when I'm playing solo shows. And it's got a separate output. So when I am playing with a drummer, you can use the auxiliary output to go like right into their ears. So that's really helpful, when nothing's worse than a band that can't hear the loop and then everybody's off time and you train wreck, although it can make for some interesting jazz. Then I've been experimenting a lot with post loop effects. And so one of my newer pedals actually also is this Eventide Rose, which is a modulated delay pedal. I'm still learning how it works, because I kind of turn it on and it goes, and I have a expression pedal hooked up to it. So like, for example, I'll just play like a pre-recorded loop, and then I'll turn the Rose on. And so I like having the post loop effect also because, like, for example, right now I have the loop completely turned off, but you can hear the trail of that effect is still going. So I can then, while that thing is going crazy and doing all these weird oscillations and things, I can turn the loop off, and using the soft step, I can like bank up to a new sound and then go into a new song seamlessly without stopping. So.
Nice. That's a good way. So during sets, now it's a little different between Echo Test and playing with Adrian, but with Adrian, and in different gigs that you have, you are switching between the bass 6 and your, traditional 4 and 5. What do you have to adjust the pedals accordingly, kind of, or do you, what's that process like for you?
So as you can see, I have 2 small boards here. And so after years of like carrying around a big monster, pedal board that was servicing everything, Adrian and EchoTest stuff, solo shows and things like that. And also being a nomad for 6 years until lockdown, basically, this kind of facilitated that. It became necessity to separate the boards, so that way when I would go on tour with Adrian, I could just bring the smaller piece, because Adrian is a whole sonic world in and of himself, with his axe effects and everything that he's using. So I don't need, for example, I'm not using the looper when I'm playing with Adrian, even though we're only a trio. He's the one doing the looping. So I just use the pitch factor and the H9, this side of the board, the distortion, and mainly in that gig, I'm using the fuzz, using some crazy. I'm allowed, in some of the improvised sections, I can get a little crazy, and there's been times where he's come up to me after shows like, maybe that was a little bit too much.
Right.
You're stepping in my territory a little bit. So I like to push the boundaries with him. I mean, I've been playing with him for 15 years, give or take. So.
And you were big into pedals and effects and MIDI leading up to that, and kind of with your upbringing, on bass, and then you link forces with Adrian, who of course is known for his pedals and effects and
Sure.
what he does with them. What have you learned most from playing with him and just being around him as far as effects? Because that's kind of like a Voltron link up of you two, and then what you guys do, of course, is phenomenal. So what have you taken from your time with him?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned all that, because really, like, when I think about, I often get asked the question, like, what bass players did you listen to growing up? Who are your main influences? And of course, there are bass players on that list, but I mean, one of the musicians I really looked up to was Adrian himself. So when I got the gig with him at 20 years old, that was really life-changing. And I've just sort of been like a sponge the whole time, absorbing everything. And of course, he inspired me from the moment I started playing bass at, age 11. So the way I approach bass, I don't really approach it as a bassist necessarily, especially with EchoTest and my own projects where I'm writing. The bass to me is more of just a vehicle for expression. So I call myself a frustrated guitar player often. And when I'm writing, guitar parts or playing solos for EchoTest music, I feel like I try to like embody Adrian at times. And it's funny because, before lockdown started, Adrian was going to do these shows with Jerry Harrison and the Turquoise guys, and they were going to do a whole celebration of Remain in Light, like the 40-year anniversary of that Talking Heads record. And Adrian was getting away from his Axe Effects rig, which is what he's been using for the last 10 years or so. And I was actually helping him come up with his pedal board for that tour, and that was really wild. And I felt so lucky and grateful, because he would like go into his little, they call it like the magic closet in his studio, and he would pull out these pieces of rack gear and say, okay, this is what I used on Great Curve, and he would just play it and just like obviously give me goosebumps.
Right.
And then I'd have to go, okay, how can I make that sound happen with and he had, of course, the moment he put it out into the Facebook world that he was gonna rebuild his pedal board, and he went to NAMM, all these manufacturers were just giving him pedals like crazy. So he had this stacks of pedals around his studio, and I'd have to like go through, all right, this one, and we just sit there and clown shoe, as we learned that term in college. I don't know if that's an actual industry term or not, but like when you try to match the sound. So I call it clown shoeing. And so a lot of it was, we were doing a lot of stuff with the H9, just because that pedal is so deep, and it's all about really trying to get as small of a footprint as possible. I mean, I know none of us are traveling right now and touring, sadly, but really that's been like a huge thing for me of what I've learned over the years, is like how to get all these amazing sounds down to as small of a pedal board as possible. Because I don't want to carry that shit around, and B, I don't want to plug everything in and, have all that stuff, all that work to do,
Right. Of course. Well, good. Well, if we could get a playing demo from you, I know we're all, we would love to hear your stuff in action. And if anyone here hasn't already seen it, go to YouTube and watch her video of E while Boy paints, I believe. The
Yeah.
title of it. I've watched that an unhealthy amount of times. It blows my mind every time I watch it. So go check that out. But in the meantime, we have her live. So
Thanks.
Julie,
All right.
feel free.
I'll play a little something with like the drums programmed in and, you know, showcasing a couple different sounds where I'm like changing the presets on the bass itself, just so you can hear like some of the different sounds I get with this thing. Just play a little clip of something.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That was fantastic. Well, man. Well, thank you. Whew, blew us away. Thank you so much for that demo right there. And of course, for being a part of this. And now, Jerry, if we could bring all of our panelists on, including Julie, we would love to ask you guys. We're going to close out this session with just some kind of quick hit round table questions. It'll be like the debates coming up where you'll be muted and then, but not really. Okay. So Julie, we can start with you, and this goes to every one of our panelists. What was the first pedal that you ever owned?
I believe that was the Zoom 506 because the 90s.
Yeah.
Because 90s.
Because the 90s.
Yeah, and it was a multi-effects pedal, you know, and I think I mainly used it for chorus and flanging, two effects I rarely use now. Well, I use some chorus with Adrian sometimes to get that 80s Crimson vibe, but.
Okay, got to. Tim, what was your first pedal that you ever owned, if you can remember this?
Well, my dad had a small stone phase shifter, so maybe that, other than that belonged to him. I think my first thing I had like one of those rack mount Art MP things, like digital delay, like, you know, it's a rack mount thing. That's the first one I actually really used. But yeah, I mean, pretty much the small stone.
Great. And Ian, same question to you.
I wish I remembered what it was called. Ibanez made it. It was sort of like molded plastic, 3 buttons, and it was chorus, compression, and an EQ, like a graphic. And I just love looking at it. It was like black and pink. I wish I still had it.
Nice, right. All right, Neil, same question to you. First pedal.
First pedal I got 2 pedals at the same time. I got a Fuzz Face and an MXR 90, I think.
Wow.
Cool pedals.
Because I was trying to create some sound. I can't remember what it was, but the Fuzz Face was just basically because back then I wanted to be Jack Bruce or Jimi Hendrix or anybody that played like that.
Right. Of course. John A., while we have you on, first pedal.
With that, I wanted to be like Jack Bruce or one of those guys, but it was the SPX 90, and I had a little on and off switch brought out in front, turned it off and on, and I would reach back when I wanted to change things, but that was it. But it was powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan Herrera, same question to you.
I think it was an Electro-Harmonix Baseballs, which is a really cool sounding pedal. It does kind of a thing. And I remember loving that thing so much that it didn't occur to me that I should be smart about where I used it. I just had it and I just wanted it to like be on. And so yeah, I annoyed a lot of those early bands for sure.
That's all right. All right. Second question, and we'll start with you, Jonathan. What is one song with an affected bass tone that has always just blown you away? Like, was there a song that gave you that aha pedal moment?
It's a good question. OJ's For Love of Money, Anthony with that flanger sound that comes in and out on the intro. I remember hearing that and just like, what is that? How is he making that happen? You know, I think that for me, that's it. Yeah.
That's right. Julie, what about you?
Whew. I would say probably off the top of my head, like Tony Levin, the Funk Fingers, which is an analog effect, literally like the ends of the drumsticks taped or Velcroed to his fingers. On the song Sleepless, he used a delay pedal. Yeah, there you go.
You got the Tony's Funk Fingers.
You got Funk Fingers?
So just such a cool percussive sound, especially with the delay. And then, yeah, to get to play that with him every night on tour was just insane. I'm
sure of it. Nice. Tim, what about you?
When I watched the Sting Bring on the Night movie, and also it was Dream of the Blue Turtles, but there's a song called Consider Me Gone, which is kind of a shuffle, right? And about halfway through the song, like they after 2 days, they go to the 5 chord and hang on the 5 chord, and then they come out of it, and Daryl Jones puts on his EBS octave, and it's just like this shuffle, and it just like blew my head off because it just was like, wow, because he didn't change the bass line, he just kept playing the line, but it was like with the octave, you know, below it. Also, actually, come to think of it, Living Color, Pride, the song called Pride, after a good part of the song is over, like they come back into the verse, and Mud Skillings is playing same line down an octave. It just, you know, boggled the mind. This is like, you know, late 80s, early 90s.
Right. Oh yeah. What about Neil? What about your thoughts on that?
His iPad just went out.
Oh, okay. All right, let's go to John A. then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much of an effect was on the bass, but to me it was so psychedelic. And it was Led Zeppelin, Dazed and Confused. The way that sounded to me, and that was the very first song I ever played with a drummer. And it's one of my all-time favorites. And then I mean, I love what Stevie Wonder does with effects on some of the bass stuff from those early records. Just amazing.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm going to keep you on, Ian.
Hold on. Before that, Neil is texting me. It was Larry Graham, Distortion on Dance to the Music, Sliced Down.
Ah, nice. Beautiful. Okay. All right, Ian, what about you?
Yeah, for me it was a synth-based thing. I was listening to hair metal, right? And I had these cool uncles. I remember that came over and like pulled cherry pie out of the tape deck, like whoosh, and put in moving pictures. And it was that first note of Tom Sawyer. I was like, what the hell is that? Like that big Moog drop, Taurus pedals maybe. I had no idea. It's just magical.
Beautiful. All right, I'm going to keep you right there for the final question of the night, which is figurative gun to your head. If we took away all your pedal boards and you were only allowed one pedal to play the rest of your life, what would it be?
You're starting with me?
Yeah. That's
It would for sure be an octave pedal, and probably the 3-leaf Tim's octave pedal. It's the best.
nice. Great. Tim, what about you then?
Yeah, probably the same.
Oh, that's 2. We have 2. Julie, what about you?
Can I cheat and say the H9?
Yeah.
We'll
So-
accept it. You get the multi.
Exactly.
Exactly. Jonathan Herrera?
Just to be interesting, I'll have it because octave is cool. Maybe some kind of analog delay. Like I have several. I use a Maxon 89 now, an old one. But just like the way that when you turn the feedback up and they oscillate, you can do that stuff, and you can kind of make it do reverb and slapback, and they're just, I could imagine kind of getting lost in that world.
Oh yeah, of course. And John A, what's your answer for
I'd
this?
probably have to go with my old Boss GT6B, only because it does so many things and it's just so old school.
Right. Of course. And Chris, do we have a text in answer from Neil? From
Neil's
the
back, at least on my screen. Are you there, Neil?
There we go. We got it. All right, Neil, if you could have only one pedal to play the rest of your life, what would it be?
Funk Machine.
There you go. Yep. And we got Herrera with it. Well, perfect. Well, man, thank all of our panelists for being here. We had a blast, and I know personally, I learned a ton from all of this with pedals and effects and everything in between. So thank you all for being here, all of our panel. You guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Of course. And again, thank you, Jerry, and the Los Angeles College of Music. If you want to be properly educated, go to lacm.edu. And for all your bass news and everything low end, go to bassmagazine.com. We'll be back next month with another masterclass. But again, thank you all for tuning in and watching, and have a good night. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
All right,
Great to
thank
hear
you.
all
Thanks,
you guys.
everybody.
You guys.
Good night.